All right. Looks like we're set up. Welcome to the stream. 10 days ago, we tested the brand new AMD 9070 XT in some Blender tests and Viewport tests. Since then, we have a new driver for the GPU, and also we're now on Blender 4.4. So last time it was the beta for this version, and the documentation specifically calls out adding the support for this new series of GPUs in 4.4. So the test worked last time. We're just going to make sure that nothing significant changed so that you guys have the most up-to-date information for this GPU. One thing we haven't done is this Blender Open Data Benchmark. I downloaded that finally, so we'll start throwing numbers in those every time we test this and see how things stack up on there. So other than that, not much else to set up, so let's just go right into the tests. We're going to hop into the remote desk here. So here I just have the driver version. It looks like Adrenaline thinks we're up to date. I have 25.3.1 and it does work in Blender as of today. And here I have our classroom scene ready to go. I will just pull this over to the side so it fits with our task manager. And then on task manager, it's not the best monitor tool, but it does show the core temperature on the GPU. So I'll leave that open. And I'll show you the preferences here. So one thing that changed in Blender itself is the HIIP-RT checkbox does not say experimental anymore. So according to the release notes, they view this as stable as far as they're concerned. So go check out those release notes. It's just on blender.org on the download page. You can see new updates. If you want to read more about this, they did remove the HIIP-RT support for non-RT AMD GPUs, which just means that this checkbox will not be available for 5000 series and older AMD GPUs. And then as far as support goes, some things have changed, and 4.4 doesn't run as many GPUs as 4.3 did, I believe. So with this series, we can run HIIP-RT and any other ray tracing AMD GPU. So 6000 series and newer can use this checkbox. All right, so we've got that set up to just render on the GPU. So now all we need to do is start it up. Pretty straightforward. Not much to these tests. Some of them will have to sit and wait. Obviously, this is live, so a couple of them take a couple minutes, but other than the open data benchmark, let me know what other tests we can do. I know I'm gonna prepare some video editing stuff and Unreal Engine stuff, but that'll come in another video later. So the classroom scene here, it looks like we got just under 19 seconds. We'll say 18.8 seconds. So the red line on the screen is from 10 days ago when we did the first test. So we'll just throw in our new information. Not much to it. Move on to Barbershop. And we'll kind of look at how these compare as we go along, but with the driver change, it'll be interesting to see how much really did get updated. So I think what we really need to know is whether or not this HIIP-RT will get more updates, or updates that will use the hardware better, because last time we saw that this didn't run as well as we expected based on how AMD described it as being so much better at ray tracing. And I think obviously in all the gaming tests that people have seen, it is better at ray tracing in games, but we haven't necessarily been able to see a huge jump for rendering yet. Let's switch over to the live chat. All right. So classroom is a fairly heavy bench. Takes just a couple minutes. The GPU I have, if you didn't see the last video, is the ASRock Tai Chi, and it is a really good cooler. In these long scenes, it doesn't get much above 50 degrees on the core temp, so that's pretty good. It's large, and it uses the new power connector that everybody's so afraid of. Although this doesn't have the power draw like the 5090s, so I don't think it'll be an issue. All right. Yeah, so people have been asking for video editing benchmarks. What I use is DaVinci Resolve. So I'll plan on making some sort of 4K timeline, and we'll just set up a rendering benchmark for that. So that'll come here sooner or later. As far as like Unreal Engine, I'm going to have to just figure out how to make some cool scenes in there that we can use. But let's see, Barbershop is done. It looks like 92 seconds is what we got here. And that sounds pretty familiar. Okay, so last week we got 95 seconds. So, I mean, on paper, we're 3 seconds faster this time. But we'll see. The Lone Monk is probably going to be the most interesting, because that one was the surprise last time. So we'll have to see if there's something special about that scene that AMD GPUs really like. Let's open up Lone Monk next. Okay. We've got our 9070 XT enabled. And we'll render this one. This one does take a bit longer. All right, looks like it started quick, so no delay for shaders to compile. All right, and so the other question I get asked a lot is, can you test like Autodesk Maya or Arnold Render and things like that? And I'm gonna try my best to get some student licenses or something like that. So I reached out to Autodesk today, hoping that they'd kind of be willing to discuss it. I think it could be kind of a nice relationship between us to show their software, and then that allow me to test all of this stuff on these other softwares that I frankly just can't afford to pay for all of them. So hopefully some of those will work out. I'd really like to try Houdini as well. And yeah, I guess if there's any other ones, let me know, because really I can reach out to all of them, and the worst they can say is no, it doesn't do anything for us. So we'll see. We'll see what they say. All right, we're halfway done. So this is the one I really want to see. In almost every test I've done on this entire spreadsheet, the Lone Monk scene is the one that Intel GPUs and AMD GPUs just really pull ahead relatively to the NVIDIA GPUs for some reason. And we'll have to dig into that. If somebody knows why that might be, let us know in the chat or in a comment, because it is pretty strange. I think at the base level, even if there's some shading nodes that are different, it's still the same cycles renderer, so I don't really know what could change there. And maybe AMD hardware is just better in longer scenes for some reason too, I don't know. But this one is almost done. And it's going to denoise here. Okay. 2 minutes, 17.5 seconds. So we'll go, let's do 137. Let's just put it in 137.5. Okay, so just looking up here at the red text, it looks like we are actually 4.5 seconds faster. So not a large percentage, but it definitely seems like there might be a measurable improvement with the full 4.4 release of Blender instead of the beta. All right, and then just to be thorough, let's do the Scanlands scene finally. Okay, we'll open our preferences here. Everything's in order. And we'll render the image. All right. Yeah, and before today, I never ran the open data benchmark from Blender yet. It's interesting that it's not a much of a UI to run that test. I kind of expected that it would be similar to rendering scenes like in here. So over time, I'll be really curious to see how the classroom scores come out relative to the actual rendering time scores, because it does include classroom in the open data benchmark. So that might be the one thing that we could maybe tie these together or see that they're really different. But I prefer to test scenes in this way versus just benchmarks, because I think this gives you a good idea of what the GPU can actually produce. So if you're producing still frames, it's not as big of a deal, but if you're animating, you know, saving a few seconds on a frame can really make a difference when you have thousands of frames per minute of footage. So that's why we kind of run these. And I know there's newer ones, and there's some that are EV focused, so I'll try to add those over time as well. People ask about EV a lot, so I just have to kind of work it into the testing workflow, I guess. But all right, Scanlands is done. We'll round that up to 1 minute and 24 seconds. So we'll go 84. And that one is just a little bit, technically a little bit more than 1 second faster than last time. So really percentage wise, let's just sort these so we can see them easier. But I think we're going to see that all of these tests are mathematically similar to last week's tests, which isn't a super exciting result, but what it shows is that nothing really changed too much about the software that was holding this back. So I think the real problem still is that either HIIP-RT is not perfectly optimized yet, or AMD's ray tracing in what I call pure ray tracing in this sort of workflow, it's just maybe not as good as it is in games where they use tricks in the way that NVIDIA uses tricks. So obviously here we got 0.6 seconds difference on Blender 4.4. And so that's a very, very similar test. So not a big change there on Classroom. Barbershop, we'll highlight the new results in yellow here. Barbershop was 3 seconds faster. So around 2% faster. So it's something. It's just not as exciting as we hoped. Lone Monk scene, this one I believe saved the most actual time. And see, like in this test, the 9070 XT beats the 5070 by a few seconds, and it beat itself by about 4.5 seconds. So again, not a very large percentage, somewhere 2 to 3%. So measurable, but not crazy. But like I said, you can see this AMD GPU competes much better with more expensive GPUs on the Lone Monk scene. And if we go back to like Barbershop, you can see that they're down here by the 4060 Ti. And on Lone Monk, they're closer to the top of the chart. So it's a little curious that this is the only scene that shows up in. And finally, Scanlands. Sort these and highlight that yellow. This one was 1 second different. So basically no change there. So we didn't lose any speed. And I know sometimes when new versions of Blender come out, especially when they're newer, the GPUs kind of get slower for a version or two as they work on the render engines. But and then I know the 5070 has an issue with that I'll have to test another day, where their speed is apparently much better on Blender 3.6 than 4.3. So that's another one I'll have to look into. here in the next week or two. All right, so let's go back to our remote desk and let's run the Blender Open Data Benchmark. So I did check to make sure that it would run, because there's been some driver issues and whatnot on the last couple of attempts I've made, but we should be good to go. So we're going to run it on 4.4. That should be the only one we can run on this GPU. And it says we're going to run Monster, Junk Shop, and Classroom. And then we're going to switch down to our GPU. And we'll just start the benchmark. Kind of put it in the middle of the screen here. And so this one does take a few minutes, and there's really not much to look at. So I won't flip back and forth out of remote desktop, just so we're not adding any loading or CPU work. But you can see the specs on the side of the screen, and we can maybe tab through those. But this is my 5950X benchmark computer with 64 gigs of RAM, and then obviously the 9070 XT. Let's see. If you guys are hanging out, say hi in the chat. It's always good to know who came by. All right. Now we're on the junk shop scene. I know there's a scene called Secret Deer that I think I have ran before, just maybe not on a video. I think that one might be an Eevee scene. So one of these days I'll kind of look into those, and maybe I'll go back and run some Eevee render tests. But we'll still get to the retest of the viewport here before we're done. I think it'll probably be like the other tests where it'll be about the same result, but we'll just check and make sure. I think the rendering and the viewport work differently enough that it's worth making sure nothing's been improved in the viewport more than the rendering. All right. Getting close. And the other thing we could do if we want is I can test the 4090 that I have on my main workstation, because that would all be set up and ready to go. So we can do that if we want to, just to have something to compare to. All right, looks like our benchmark's done. Let's just go to the whole numbers on these. We'll just round. I think that's fine. So across we have 1556, 842, I believe, and 742. Oops, we don't want to start a new session there. 742. And yeah, so obviously there's nothing else to compare to at the moment, so we may as well just go back and run the 4090 after we're done testing this card. It can't hurt. But yeah, there's our first results for those. I'm not used to these numbers, so I can't just off the top of my head compare them to anything at this point. And then also just a side note, Cinebench still does not run the 9070 XT. I did open it to make sure, and I think we'll probably have to wait for a new version of Cinebench. I assume there will be a 2025 version, and at that point we'll start adding those results again, but it just doesn't see the GPU at all. All right, so let's go back. I think we're good here with the Blender Open Data Benchmark. So I'll submit those. We'll worry about we'll do that later. Okay. And so now let's open back up our Blender 4.4. Want to make sure we get the right one here. For some reason, the Benchmark launcher does not want to close, so that's fun. All right. Huh, that's funny. Yeah, I don't know what it's doing. I guess we have Task Manager open. We can just go kill it. It must be just waiting for me to go do whatever it wanted me to do in the browser. So, oh well, we'll deal with that in a little bit. All right. So I'm going to open up this scene. This is the same one that you guys saw in the video 10 days ago. It's just an animation that I've been working on with my own character. So, but it gives us a little bit of an idea of viewport performance. So we'll do the same thing. And it's been discussed in the comments quite a lot. This isn't a super scientific test by any means. But you could see there's a little bit of lag, a little bit of bouncing around. 10 days ago, it was better than that. I don't know if there's something else, or this. Honestly, we need to try to kill this open data thing. That might be causing part of our issue. So let's go make sure. Yeah, it's not even using any resources. Because we really can't do a good test if we have known background processes other than the rest of Windows bloatware that we have. There it is. Let's just end that. Okay. So at least the CPU isn't spinning on trying to close that launcher. Ekla85 is waving. Hello, welcome. Yeah, nice to have you here. So let's just do what we did last time. We'll start running this animation, and you can see the frame rate up at the top, and it looks like it's hanging out at about 12 FPS, which is honestly slightly better than before. It was hanging out a little bit above 11 last week, which isn't a huge difference, but it does look more stable at 12 without bouncing around a lot. So that is a slight improvement, and if you want to see that comparison, I'll add the data to my spreadsheet sometime. I just didn't add it for today. But this one does slightly beat the 5070 in the viewport as of my most recent test of the 5070. So that's pretty good. You know, that's a good little bit of a win for AMD in this case. Hello, thanks for the GPU test. Sorry. Does AMD have something similar to optics for denoising settings? At work, I have a RTX 3050, and at home, I have an RX 6600. The problem is that AMD GPUs don't allow selecting optics in the denoising settings, which makes the 6600 significantly slower during real-time denoising in the viewport when using Cycles Render Engine. Yeah, so the 6600, let's open our settings here. I don't know if these are big enough to see on the screen. So let me just scale the viewport here for you guys. I try to scale it up beforehand. Let's just go up to like 1.35 or something. And then it'll be a little bit easier to read on the screen, hopefully. So hopefully that helps a little. But and this would be the exact same as your 6600. So at this point, now that this is fully integrated into Blender 4.4, the denoiser you can use, and I'll open the viewport sampling here, is the open image denoise. So this is what Intel and actually all three brands can use open image denoise. So what I normally do when I'm working in the scene, and my workstation is the 4090 GPU, but I actually prefer to use the open image denoiser in the scene because you can set the samples really low and get a kind of fuzzy picture, but it has a decent amount of shading on it almost instantly. So I prefer to use open image denoise. And if you turn on denoising but set the samples all the way down, it'll actually kind of let you see the animation with really bad shading, if that makes sense. If I use the optics denoisers, they're a lot slower in the viewport. They do give a better quality, but you have to wait for them. Okay. Yeah, so you have to use open image denoise. And I've run into this problem a lot where my files are set up for optics, and then I try to send it to the render farm, and Intel and AMD GPUs just default to no denoising, or they have errors. So having it set up on open image denoise is not a bad deal. So hopefully that answers your questions. Yeah, and that's so if you're in the viewport, you're probably not too worried about quality. So play around with the noise threshold, especially. You can set that up pretty high. We have it low for this test, meaning that the quality is really good. And I have the denoiser in the viewport to set starting at 256 samples. And that's kind of just to make sure that we're hitting this test a little bit harder, or hard enough so that we're not just maxing it out with the frame rate. So let me back this animation up. And I think what we did last time is we just we went to the render preview. And I didn't change any of our sampling or denoising options over here, just so you guys know. So this is the same as the last test. So now I'll kind of center the scene on the screen here, and then we'll just start to play the animation. And this one, like I've said every time, this is not as useful of a test, just because obviously it's only going to render some of the frames. But with frame dropping on, it is running the scene at, it looks like about 12 to about 17 frames per second. So this isn't how you would work on your scenes anyway, but it's just a reference. So, the 4090, you get more pictures of what's going on basically, but this isn't bad. This is with everything turned on, and these trees are all animated, and there's just all kinds of stuff in the scene. So this is definitely usable. But I will let this render for just a second in the viewport with our materials turned on. And especially look at like the trees in the background. I know that my stream is somewhat low resolution just because I don't have the upload speed for fancy streaming, but these trees are just, they're realistically shaded, and they're absolutely crazy high detail. And so for this GPU to be able to give you this picture, in just a few seconds, you can really see what the scene will look like. And keep in mind, this is supposed to be a $600 MSRP, which good luck finding that. But once they're available, being able to see this in a few seconds on that cheap of a GPU is really a crazy thing, because just a couple of years ago, this would have taken a long time to be able to see anything near that nice. So, for all the data that we show that makes this GPU look slow, I tell people in the comments, and I argue with people sometimes in there a little bit, but if you're a mixed user, if you're using Blender and you're gaming and you're doing, especially if your 3D work is a little bit more casual, then this is definitely a good value still. Just because it loses on the render tests doesn't mean it's terrible. And most people are not rendering really heavy cycle scenes and running animations. So where you'd really want to consider it is You know, the people that need 4090s are ones that are trying to run thousands of frames every couple of days. And yeah, it makes the viewport a little faster than this, but not so much that it matters really. But anyway, so you know, viewport wise, that's about all we can do. I would say that it is slightly improved. So either the drivers are more stable or the Blender itself is more stable. But no, that's looking like they didn't damage anything, so we're good there. All right, so we ran all our tests. The one thing that I don't have a data point for is my 4090. If we want to go run that open data benchmark, I know that's not related to this GPU. So if somebody is opposed to that, I guess let me know in the chat. But I'll go run that quick just because we're here. We may as well add some stuff to it. Let's just close that remote desktop for now. And then let's type in our 4090 here, and let's just see how they compare. And obviously we're not comparing the super expensive 4090 to the relatively affordable 9070 XT for any reason other than it's just 2 data points that we can grab right now. So panel wants a refresh. We will wait on that. And let's just, let's run the benchmark scenes. Windows is always trying to protect me from running the softwares I want to run. We're going to run 4.4, all 3 scenes. And it's got to download the benchmarks, but that shouldn't be a problem. I'm on Starlink internet and the download speed is pretty good, but the upload speed is not nearly as good, so downloading's not a huge deal. Yeah, but while we're sitting here, what else do you guys want to see? I've got all these things, all this different hardware. I'm planning on rerunning the 7800 XT and the 7600 XT with new Blender and new HIIP-RT. I'm curious if the older GPUs get any speed boosts or not. I have to go back and rerun the 5070 on Blender 3.6 because everybody's telling me that it used to be faster, or the older Blender versions were faster than the current ones. So that'll be kind of a separate short video. And then hopefully NVIDIA gets a studio driver done for the 5072. All right. So we're going to pick our 4090 and we'll just go ahead and start. And so now I'm curious to see if these scenes actually run faster on faster GPUs or if it just runs the same test to see what the frame rate is. Raven Lion says, "Hi there, not going to cry about it, but just wondering if you didn't give me credit for testing XTX and 4.4. I really don't dwell on this, or if you managed to get one on your own." Oh, no, that was one of the things I wanted to do to prepare for this stream, and you're right. So don't let me forget. I'll go grab that. No, I will let you know what other benchmark scenes I need to test. There was another subscriber that was actually offering to ship me 7900 XTX. Obviously, I would just pay the shipping costs back and forth, but then I could test it firsthand. But if a few people contribute their test data, then we don't have to ship the GPU back and forth either. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate the offers for basically testing third party for me. That helps a lot. But no, yeah, I mean, any data you have, we'll pull it up here, and I'll pull up the comment on my phone and we'll type it in once this test is done, because there is no reason we shouldn't be showing that. Yeah, no, I really appreciate the help. Not shipping from Europe. Nope. I do not blame you there. I think that would cost way too much. Okay, let's see. It's getting harder to find comments, you guys. You guys are talking to me a lot more. I think in the last month I've had more comments than I did the entire first year of my channel, maybe even more than that. All right. Well, let's throw these in since we have them here. Okay. Oh, and I suppose that won't let me just lock this to the side. There we go, because that won't let me show both of these at once, will it? Let's just do the same thing, we'll round. So we'll go 5212, 25, 97, and 2670. So there you go. I mean, there's the, let's type in the market price of the 4090 here. It's just somewhere around $3.2 billion. So if you're doing a price comparison, the 4090 looks pretty bad these days. And yeah, so you pay many times more and you get 2.5 or 3 times the speed basically. And I don't know, do you guys trust the open data benchmark? I know it's just another test, but people debate about it a lot. So I'm curious to know if you guys like that test or not. But obviously it's easy to run, so we'll include it. All right, I gotta find that comment so we can show those, because we have a whole set of data for the 7900 XTX. What social media are you most active on, YouTube or something else? I would say YouTube, yeah. I have TikTok and I have Instagram, but I really don't use them except for just a place to post the shorts and stuff to try to kind of expand the audience. And by the way, I am going to launch the Discord channel soon. I know everybody has one, but I think it'd be a good place to keep some of these really good conversations that we have in comments. And they'd be a little more permanent. We could almost use them like Reddit threads so that they're stored there, because we have a lot of conversations that are just, they're way more information than I could put into a video. So I think I'll send that link out pretty soon, maybe tomorrow. There's not much in there yet, but it's just a place to store conversations. I don't think you can find the discussions that people have on the comments here anywhere else on the internet, frankly. And as we add more tests, I think that's going to be more true as we go along. But yeah, I think that one will be a big deal. And then YouTube itself is probably my main focus. It's just kind of the best platform for what I'm trying to show. All right, hold on, guys. Let me find this. Literally just got to scroll and scroll and scroll. People have been really into the GPU videos this last month. Man, you guys are crazy. Wasn't that like, that comment was like today, right? Was that today or yesterday? Raven Lion says, I find the Blender benchmarks a bit weird or a bit misleading. Oh, okay. AMD's Luda looks pretty different than HIP or CPU cycles. Really? Interesting. Well, and what I think is weird about it, just seeing it for the first time today, is it shows you the scores, and I think those are GPU scores, but it lists the system specs again. So I'm not entirely sure. Is it a combination of all the parts? Is that what this tests, or is it actually testing what it said it was doing? So now I'm tempted. Let's run it one more time just to see on my processor. And this I haven't really talked about a lot, but I have the 24-core Threadripper 7965WX. So I'm curious to see what that will score. Because if this gets a high score, there's no way this scores as high as a 4090 or any GPU really. CPUs just don't have that kind of speed. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can get a weird test here. And obviously, if these are the same numbers, it just means that this tests CPU plus GPU, right? But then why would you be able to pick? All right. Michael Halsell says, thanks for the test. You're welcome. I'm glad that I'm able to do this for people so that you guys can make decisions. Accidental Culture says, how do Unity and Unreal perform? And Substance Painter Designer with the 9070 XT. I have plans to add a lot more softwares. Unreal Engine I've used, but I don't have any scenes yet. And I think it'd be more valuable to test in the viewport or the editor than it would be in rendering, but I'm not really sure because there are demo scenes, but I don't think we want to get toward those because to me those are more like gaming benchmarks, and we really want to know how the editor works, right? I think that's what you guys want to see, but let me know. So Moravian Lion says, yes, we all have Discord servers, LOL. It's a good idea to have one for these tests. There's a lot of user-friendly features for conversations, yep. And then Zaluda scores a bit higher than HIIP-RT last time I checked, but the image quality is noticeably different. Yeah, way back when I tested Zaluda, and it was much faster on AMD for sure. But I couldn't get it to work on this 9070 XT. Do you know the performance of Unreal and Substance with the 9070 XT? Yeah, I don't know if I do have Substance Painter and I use it frequently. I don't know how I would test that actually. I can picture how I would test Unreal. I don't know how I'd test Substance Painter. So that's an interesting one, but I guess we could just get in there and play around with it and make sure it works. Let's see. We need some more comments in this chat. I feel like a fangirl. Yes, would love to see engine benchmark. Yeah, I really do want to get to the Unreal Engine stuff. It's just at this point, I'm trying to get trial licenses for Autodesk programs like Maya. I want to learn Unreal Engine, but I just have to figure out how to do all this stuff. You know, maybe we get on a live stream and we just start building scenes. If you guys know how to use Unreal Engine more than I do, you could maybe help me just get to the point where we have something. But you know, I've got in there before and just thrown mountain ranges all around the place, but other than that, I haven't used it a ton. In the future, can I send in self-built Blender scenes that are GPU and tested? Yeah, if you guys have scenes you want me to test, absolutely. That makes my life way easier. If you are able to create scenes to test specific hardware or like Blender settings that can change how the GPU is used, that's a huge deal, because then I don't have to wait till I can figure out how to build it. So if you guys have those, you know, and like the Discord server might be a great place to share those, or we can just do it on email with a drive link or whatever. But that would help a ton. And you guys are going to make my GPU videos like an hour. We're going to be like Gamers Nexus here, where we just go on a list. But that would be huge. So if you want to get a hold of me about that, I'll do whatever way you want to share it. That's a great idea. Plus, then you guys know how you use the stuff. I use Blender, I use Substance Painter, but I don't really use Unreal Engine, you know, and in my everyday life, I want to learn it, but it's not something that I know how to do. So I have the hardware. I can do what I can to try to get some of the software, but you know, if you've got the scenes, let's do it. Let's test everything you guys want to know. I'm just going to search for your name in the comments. I don't even know if that works. Actually, Lion, why don't do you have that comment? Can you find that quicker than I can? Could you just resend it to this stream? Maybe that would be the easiest way. I don't know why it's so hard to search comments on YouTube. It's very irritating. And also, a side note with that, if you guys try to reply to a comment and you don't hear from me, it's because YouTube really tries to hide replies to replies, and I have to manually search for them. So if you haven't heard from me, it's probably YouTube's fault, not mine. So I reply to literally every single comment. Let's see. Which comment? Well, you were just saying you sent me the 7900 XTX results today, did you not? Or maybe that was Petch. Let me go see. I thought that's what you meant. Let me scroll back through the live chat. Now I'm getting confused here. I will definitely give you credit for GPU tests. Yeah, so if you sent them to me, just remind me. I thought that's what you meant, though, that you sent me some and I was just not telling you. But what I normally do is I'll just kind of come in here and add a comment on the like over here, Edgar the Face had sent in 7900 XTX results a while ago. And then if you don't want me to say who sent it in, then I won't, but it's up to you guys. And same thing with the CPU test. That's kind of an older one, but we have just a few results, and I think I still have 2 or 3 people's results to plug into this one. That one's just a fluid simulation test. Unreal Engine 5 benchmarks of some kind would be very popular for a lot of game devs and artists. Yeah, that makes sense. I know game devs are one group that I kind of barely overlap with on my content, and I would love to expand into that. I'd love to make a game someday, but yeah, I can't even put together an Unreal benchmark on my own yet, then that's going to be a while off. But yeah, let's start the Discord server, make some polls to figure out what people want to see, what benchmarks, features, app usage, or you can just start with anything you find that's great and easy to work with and see what sticks. Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of what I try to do. My hang up is I don't want to show software as if I know what I'm doing until I do. So I don't want to get in there and just kind of make stuff up. So I'm finally kind of getting confident enough to show my Blender work on streams more, but I wouldn't do that until I felt like I knew what I was talking about. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I was just wondering if you have one yourself now. I don't have a 7900 XTX now. I will add your data to the chart, and we'll talk about it in the next AMD video when I retest those 7000 series. I'll specifically mention it there because the 7900 XTX is probably the one people ask about the most. So that will be a good data point to have. So I appreciate that. Accidental Culture says, I need a new GPU. Almost bought the 9070 XT until I saw your previous video. Now I would love to see some software performances first. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hoping Autodesk will reply because I really like to try Maya. I know people ask for that one all the time. I do own ZBrush, but just like I said, I don't really know how to use it as well as I'd like to. So someday I can maybe work into that, although that one's really too expensive. I would tell people if you're gonna start fresh learning sculpting, just go to Blender. Don't buy ZBrush to sculpt. And hopefully I get some nasty comments for that, but I'll fall on that sword any day. I use it for fast rate topology, but it's too expensive, honestly. And what kind of CPU do you think fits the 9070 XT? That's an interesting question. People ask that a lot. It's not so much that you can match a CPU properly. That's more of a topic in gaming. What I would say is if you're going to do 3D work, you want to run at least 8 cores in one of the latest 2 generations if possible. And even 8 cores, I think 8 cores, it's kind of a hard answer because there is no right answer. But I would say 8 to 12 cores is the most efficient use of your money, because most tasks are going to use higher clock speeds. So unless you get something crazy like my Threadripper that you can overclock, like this thing is 350 watts and I have it overclocked to 5 gigahertz on all 48 threads, but it's just not worth the price. Most tasks will not use more than about 12 cores at most, and even really heavy CPU fluid simulations, they can't make use of infinite cores. They just don't have enough parallel workflows to be able to use them all. So I would say get something like a 9800X or a 9900X or higher. If you want the 9950, do that. If you want to go with Intel, I would go Core Ultra series or newer. I would not go 13th or 14th gen unless you're really good with BIOS and motherboards and making sure that stuff is set up properly, because they did have the issues with the CPUs burning on 13th and 14th gen Intels, and I don't know that they fixed it across the board. They kind of blamed each other, and so if you're not like a super user on the PC, then maybe don't go out on a limb for that yet. But I think the Core Ultra series are fine. And then I would say a minimum of 32 gigs of RAM is maybe more important than how many cores, but I would tell people if you can swing it, do 64 gigs, because they're a lot more affordable than they used to be for those kits. And some tasks will use 40, 50, 60 gigs of system RAM easily, especially if you're dealing with like hair or large simulations. So don't skimp on RAM. Get at least 8 cores with the highest clock speed you can get, or the newest generation, and that will basically pair up nicely with any GPU you could buy. So you're not going to have too much of a bottleneck on CPU or GPU side. They're kind of going to run their own tasks separately in a way, at least more so than in gaming. Raven Lion says, also I was wondering if you'd be willing to possibly test CPUs for geometry nodes in Blender. GeoNodes have made such a long way since 3.0. I can't find any benchmarks like this. Only GPU, GPU, GPU. That's a good idea, yeah. If you would happen to have some of those setups that you know take longer to run or that could be benchmarked, yes. Otherwise, we'll just add it to the list. We'll get it in the new Discord and whatever, and we should investigate that, because I know there's a lot of things that I use that should be on geometry nodes, and I just don't use them enough. So that's a really good idea. And then, is 8 cores for AMD equal to 20 Intel cores? I actually don't know how does that work. All those E cores, P cores, and whatnot. I would compare Intel's P cores to AMD's cores more so. I think what the E cores do is they're kind of like laptop CPUs in the past, so they can run low power, but they take care of all the Windows bloatware and some of the kind of minor tasks. And the idea is supposed to be that the P cores can run a lot more efficiently if the E cores take all the distractions away from it. And I don't have a lot of modern Intel CPUs where they have P and E cores. I don't have as much experience with those. At work, I have a few in some of the workstations, but I mean they just run. I don't tinker with them. So I would say the best way to compare them is probably by what price tier they're in, because Intel's not going to be able to sell an equivalent performance of an 8-core AMD chip at a much higher price. So I would kind of compare them based on price. So if you want to go Intel, that's kind of the backwards game, and other people are better at kind of benchmarking CPUs. So that's something we could get into as well. And the problem with CPUs on my end is it takes a lot more to test like multiple models of CPUs, because I have to actually take the whole thing apart, and you have to change platforms a lot of the time. So that's not as easy for me to test right now, but I do have a few, and then everybody can submit things once we get some scenes built. But yeah, no, I think we should test everything we can. Let's see what do we got. Any AMD graphics that perform similar to a 3060? Well, we are in our chart right here. So now I need to retest the 7800 XT because it's been a while. If you can see by this note here, it was in Blender 4 right when it came out that I tested it. So there may be a little bit of a speed up, but realistically, the Intel Arc A770 and the AMD 7800 XT were pretty close in my testing, at least. Let me make sure I'm not leaving out a better result. Nope. So those two are kind of the ones that the 3060 gets close to, which is frankly a little bit embarrassing for AMD if they were marketing these for 3D work, which they aren't. But like here, the 3060 is 128 seconds in Barbershop, and the 7800 XT is just a little faster, 11 seconds. So I mean, yeah, you get a little more VRAM, and other uses are going to be faster on the 7800 XT, but the cost difference is significant. So that's kind of where you would have to decide that. Just like everything else, AMD and Intel, this is Lone Monk. 3060 kind of stays where it would on the chart, and AMD and Intel's GPUs move way up. So in this case, for some reason, the 7800 XT actually almost ties. It gets close to a 3080 Ti, and just 10% behind the 4070 even. So in general, AMD's, I guess you could say their price tiers are about 2 price tiers slower. So their 8 series ones, like the 7800, are going to be close to a 60 series in raw speed from NVIDIA. And that's not always true. And this is just Blender. Other programs might use AMD software better. And obviously the viewports run better relatively on AMD than they do just in rendering. So there's a lot of kind of grains of salt to take here. And Scanlands is another weird one. You know, here, for some reason, the 3060 actually just a little bit slower than the 9070 XT, and that really makes no sense. I would not expect that at all. But I have so many other tests from kind of lower end NVIDIA that just blow it out of the water here. So I really don't know what to say other than AMD looks like it's kind of hit or miss depending on the scenes. Man, okay. We're getting behind on the chat here. Fun fact, you can run 192 gigs on AM5. Yes, allegedly. Although if you go and look in the $1,300 motherboards, their QVLs, their support list for RAM, there are no kits for basically any motherboard that supports 4 sticks to get 192 gigs of system RAM. I know they claim that, and I waited around hoping they would make a kit, and they never did. So I'm actually running 192 gigs in my Threadripper workstation right now, and that's kind of the ideal amount for my simulations and stuff. But I never saw anybody get it stable on AM5. And if that's changed with the newer boards, you know, somebody correct me, but I mean, last I saw, you couldn't even get 4 sticks of RAM to run stable at anything higher than the base speed. So that's not super useful. But I suppose you could get 2 64 gig sticks and do 128 gigs, but those are really expensive too. Tummy Tom says, you know what would be a game changer? A physics benchmark. All I see is gaming reviews for CPUs, but nothing physics related, like time to simulate smoke, cloth, water, rigid bodies, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I have 2 comments on that. One, I'm going to start making a bunch of shorts just for fun of simulations. I want to combine like fluids, fire, and whatever, and just do some fun stuff with it. So I'll be able to talk about the performance on those a little. And then we do have one old CPU test scene, and that's on this page. Let me zoom in a little more. Let me make sure my head's not in the way on the camera here. Okay. So these are some results, and a couple of them are still waiting in comments. I need to add them here. But yeah, since we're talking about them, let's just sort these, because I did add my latest workstation. And even here you can see what I mean with the value of high core count processors is not necessarily what you would expect in relatively light work. But yeah, no, more CPU tests definitely we'll be able to do. They're hard to standardize, but once we get it figured out, it's not a problem. And then, like with the Discord server being set up, I'll be able to share these files just in there, and we won't have to do the whole go to Patreon to download it for free thing, which is how you would get these current fluid tests, which works, but it's just an extra step in my opinion. I can do some geometry node to really get it to get a run for it. The only question is, how much RAM should I work with? How much RAM your system has, and should should we make it scale or limit to 32 gigs so everyone can test it? Yeah, and that's actually kind of one of the struggles I had setting up these old fluid test scenes. I wish I had it. I don't know where it is in my files, otherwise I'd show you the scene. But it's just a super simple fluid simulation, and people can record the duration. There's a light one and a heavy one, and I think the light test would take up to 16 gigs of system RAM, and the heavy one was 32 gigs. So I think most people probably have 32 if they're super into 3D work, but I think most people in general have 16. So it's tough, because simulations, I bought that Intel Xeon server. I don't know if any of you guys saw that video. It has 4 processors and 96 cores total. They don't clock very high, but I found that it actually can't run these simulations very fast because you just can't use that many threads. The software does not have the ability to split into that many pieces. So 12 to 16 cores is going to be about the most you can use unless you have infinite RAM. So really large RAM would let you do scenes that are like multiple terabytes, and for the bake files, and those are just, I mean, most people aren't going to touch those. That'd be, I've tried them. I had one that ran overnight, and I think it was 1.8 terabytes for the bake file. Didn't even get done, and it filled my hard drive, so it had to stop. And so that kind of thing is where you'd need really, really massive processors. But, you know, and like with this Threadripper, I could run 2 simulations side by side, but you can't run huge ones. You don't get more speed necessarily for more cores. So I think your high-end consumer ones, 7950 13900K, stuff like that are probably your best bet. And you can see that even on these results here. So I think there's a lot we can talk about with CPUs. That would be a good idea. But yeah, so geometry node CPU tests. Let's try to shoot for 16 or 32 gigs for scenes and see what we come up with. And if the scenes just need to be bigger, then we'll just mention how much they require, and it is what it is. I mean, you know, at some point you have to be able to have the hardware to run what we're testing for. So we'll just be clear with what we're testing on each one. Fixfell says hello, welcome to the chat. Proud Artist says hi. Do you stream using AMD GPU encoder? I stream on my RTX 4090. That's what I have in my workstation right now. I think I'm using AV1 encoding on NVIDIA. I have not tested AMD's encoders, but I know according to their spec sheet, their new ones are supposed to be, you know, super efficient. They're all AV1 now. All three brands are AV1, so they should be pretty good. But yeah, so I mean the GPU we were testing is off of a remote desktop, so I'm remoted into my test bench. I'm not using that computer on here. People were actually commenting that I shouldn't do it that way, but all of my tests have been done that way. So when we redo the entire setup eventually, I'll just screen record that machine. But for now, it's a remote desktop. So when I test these, I go and reinstall all the software to switch GPUs or to switch brands. And then we remote in and we test there. So my network is all 2.5 gigabit. And my connection to my server from my workstation is actually 10 gigabit. So I tried to reduce the latency and any sort of performance hits from remote desktop by doing that. But it's just, it is what it is, you know. And so as soon as I change it, all of my results are kind of meaningless. So that's why I haven't changed it yet. But that's just a little kind of backstory on how the testing system works. All right. I have a system with an i7-7820X and another with a 9700X, and the cloth sim speed is night and day. I can pump subdivision surface a lot more, and it still feels fast on that Zen 5 CPU. Yeah, yeah, that's basically the point, is just more cores, and you know, even more cores that are almost as fast really aren't as good as 12 or 16 really fast cores. I mean, I have 24 at 5 gigahertz, but my 16 cores in the 7950X at 5.5 gigahertz pretty significantly outperforms this Threadripper for these tests. And I mean, you can see that here. They're considerable percentages, and this is the consumer part winning, not the expensive pro chip. So it gets to be hard to find a case for really high core counts, honestly. Okay, what about some video verification for remote testers? I'll grab a camera, gonna record my monitor while crunching GeoNudes or GPU render, and then you can compile results from a bunch of configurations. Yeah, I could do that. That wouldn't be hard. I think my recording quality would suffer a little, so what I'll probably do is just I'll use my capture card and set up a second small PC just to record the video output, so that the benchmark PC doesn't feel the impact of recording at all, if that makes sense. But that's what I'll plan to do there. I think CGGeek did a video on physics sims for CPUs in 2020, but other than that, CPU benchmarks rely on games, Cinebench, and Geekbench. Either it's single core or all cores, no in between. Yeah, and it'd be kind of fun to go through, and like this Threadripper would be a great example of finding the right number of cores, because I can scale it from 4 cores up to 24, and we can see at what point does adding cores just not help very much? So that could be a super good video idea. Sebastian says, great, I'm looking for a graphics card for a Hackintosh for work, and they work best with AMD GPUs, but all I see is gaming, gaming, gaming. Yep, I'm trying to be the niche here. I'm trying to fill this gap, and it kind of seems like we're finding that. But yeah, and kind of a side note on that, I want to test a new Mac M4 one of these days, but I'm gonna have to try to save up and get one of those. But yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely tied for the best value of AMD GPU now. I think for its price and performance per watt, it's really good. All right, let's see what else we got here. Raven Lion says, I run 192 gigs on my B650. Really? 4x48. It's stable. Oh, but on this board, it's underclocked at 5200 megathreads per second. Default. Currently 3200, so it's underclocked. Okay. But MSI recently released BIOS update for the X870 boards to address this. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to see where they all got, because you know, for RAM intensive things, this Threadripper will still win because it's actually 8 channels, so the bandwidth is just massive. But for most uses, that's not going to matter. Let's see. I'm looking to buy one. We'll let you know how that works. I'll also try to overclock. Yeah, no, that'd be cool. So we're talking about overclocking the RAM on the X870. I would like to know that information, because I'm always kind of looking at what's current. So Petch says, the last I saw was that the 9000 AMDs do handle RAM a lot better, but you can't run 4 sticks at 6000 speeds. 56 should be possible, or 5600 megathreads should be possible. But if you need the memory, the lower RAM speed is worth it. That is true. If you need the RAM, you can't get around having it, so the speed has to go out the window. And honestly, knocking the RAM speed down a little, you're not going to lose nearly as much performance as if you just can't do your task at all, obviously. So have you thought about splitting your PC in half via Aster so that you could run Flamingo with 2 GPU? I don't know if that would work. Yeah, like basically running virtual machines to split the PC into multiple machines. I think you could definitely do that. I know on Blender Flamenco, it's hard to use multiple GPUs because you would have to come up with some custom code to run it twice. But the old workaround I would use is just basically set up 2 instances of Blender and pick separate GPUs for each one. And it uses more system RAM, but it runs fine. Both GPUs will run at their full speeds each. So it's a pain because you have to sign into each PC to do it. But it works for animations really well. All right, MSI claims up to 192 gigs can now run at 6000 megathreads per second, but there's very little info on their website. So I'll just go for it and see what happens. Yeah, I bet you with how high quality this Threadripper kit is for the RAM, I bet you they'll have more and more kits going on the QVLs for the motherboards. So you know, they marketed the X670 saying that you can run 192 gigs, and I think Intel's competing boards actually could run it pretty easily, but the X670s just didn't. They never got to be stable, and they never actually made kits that were stable. So it's good to hear that they are now, because that was exciting until no one got it to work. Apos Fox YouTuber claims 9070 XT's AV1 streaming is much better than how it is on 7000 series quality wise. Yeah, and that's something that I haven't delved into a lot, because like in my situation, the streaming, my upload speed isn't enough to really make use of AV1 to try to get full 1080p quality. So I haven't tested it, but that makes sense. They do update the encoders every generation. I didn't mean video verification done on your end, but for people like me, volunteers with GPUs and CPUs, you don't have access to. Oh, I see. Yeah, so more or less so that people will trust the data that third parties send to me. Yeah, no, I mean, if people want to record their benchmarks and send them to me, I can add that to my video and put your name on the video or give you credit that way. I think that adds some credibility to it. I don't know why people go out of their way to discredit benchmark tests. That seems a little strange to me, but 192 gigs at 6,000 would be nice. I've not seen anyone run this, but it might not be all CPUs that can do it. 5600 would also be fine. Yep. No, 6,000 is definitely hard to get with that capacity. This one, the kit I got for this Threadripper is actually 6,400 megathreads per second, and the kits that were from this brand, these are V-color kits, and they went all the way up to like 7,200. And I mean, they got really, really expensive, but this motherboard will run 2 terabytes of RAM at 7,200 megathreads per second, which is just wild. I don't know what you would use that for, frankly. I have had one guy on Reddit accusing me of not being reliable source with my XTX render claims. Hence, oh, okay, video verification on my end. Honestly, we get somebody doing that on this channel too. I don't understand. I think it's a mark of starting to succeed on social media when you have people that just spend their time trolling you. You know, if we have 5 different tests from the same GPU model from different people, that should be enough evidence. And I mean, unless the guy is some sort of a saboteur for NVIDIA and he's just trying to take down AMD wherever he can, I don't know. I don't understand that people do that. But I would say, for me, don't feel like you have to verify anything. It's yeah, I mean, this isn't a gaming channel. We're not here to troll and fight with each other. So I just don't understand that. But Tummy Tom says, you know, those X3D CPUs are a hot topic for gaming. Literally everyone praises them. I wonder if the extra cache would help with physics sims or shader compilation. I'm looking at you, Evie Next. Very interesting question. I think with the brand new ones, with the 9000 series CPUs with X3D, since you don't have a hit in clock speeds anymore, I think those probably could only help. I don't know that the cache is always helpful, because I've wondered that too, but I don't think it does help. The CPU I'm running has a lot more cache and it has a lot more memory bandwidth. So there should be a few advantages that I expected for simulations, and clearly it doesn't add up to enough, you know, to beat some relatively old high-end consumer chips. So they may work in some workflows, but I don't think the software can use them properly. But that is a good question. I've thought about trying to figure out how to test that. There is a Reddit thread dedicated to my specific 192 gig RAM kit from a year ago. They run them on advertised 5200 megathread speed, but only on some boards and only older RAM chips from different suppliers. Interesting. Yeah, it makes you wonder if somebody started buying them all up the ones that they could get to work, and they just maybe went to servers. Those guys tend to pay a lot more for their hardware, and they don't really care. I would love to see 9700X versus 9800X 3D versus 9950X, and the 3D of that. Yeah, I don't think it does much for simulations, and it does nothing for rendering on the CPU. It would be really interesting. I would think there might be some uses for it, but I think it's all between the RAM and the CPU. I don't think the instruction sets are what slow it down, but it'd be really cool to see. It would be very interesting. The 9800X 3D scored highest before the 9950X 3D in Photoshop, according to Gamers Nexus, but that was the only non-gaming app to have this decisive of a result for X3D chip. Okay. Yeah, so in Photoshop, yeah, I wonder why that would be. Huh. Cool. No, I've often thought, you know, those should be better at simulations, because you would think they could hold more data over between calculating each frame, but maybe they just don't have enough. Maybe they need to be like the AMD EPYC servers, where they have like almost a gigabyte of L3 cache, and maybe that's enough to make a difference. I don't know. Yeah, man, a lot of discussion. This is my most active live stream by far, so I appreciate that. I don't think I've had one where we just sat here and chatted this whole time, so that's a lot of fun. Let me know what else we can run. I do have the CPU. We could run some Cinebench, which we just talked about. That's all anybody tests on. But I do find Cinebench interesting, because it's kind of a good basic rendering comparison. And even with live streaming, let's see on R20 here. I think I have this set up to run for 1 minute, so it's not as boring as R24, but it's always interesting to me to see how CPUs change. And I really find these Threadripper processors to be funny. I'll pull up the chart here. I have this just PBO tuned to run at, it should be at 5 gigahertz. I don't think Task Manager displays it properly. And I don't know if you guys can hear the fans in the background, but this CPU just flies, and the cooler barely makes any noise. It's crazy. But again, this is a pure multi-threaded task, and simulations are not infinitely threaded, especially not in Blender or the Flip Fluids add-on. I've never found one that you can split up evenly. So once you get above about 12 cores, you start to lose the gains per core, and you just basically start to spend more money. Yeah. So there you go. There's some Cinebench. So if your CPU rendering a relatively fast scene, then these tests are fine, but they don't really tell you much else. They tell you that your GPUs, even the relatively cheap ones, are much, much faster for rendering than the CPUs. Because like in Cinebench 24, let's just start one. We won't run the full 10 minutes. But this is like maybe volumes and shader materials in Blender. Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if the 3D cache could also maybe help with geometry nodes or something, because maybe the way those are coded would use it more. I don't know. What's the point of software made specifically for benching hardware? Every software is slightly different, some more or less optimized towards specific brands. That is very true, including Blender. Honestly, NVIDIA has the corner on Blender's software. So why test something that's not even relevant for real consumer usage? Why not to just bench things people actually use? I completely agree. And that's why I try to run the actual frame renders instead of the open data benchmark, because as good as it is, what does it mean? You know, you can't see what it's doing. I think the only real good use of it is if you test enough of those and you can get a spreadsheet set up like mine where you have all these data points. It just gives you a good reference of relative speed. But yeah, it doesn't tell you what it actually does. So like here, make sure I got all the threads on. And I just think this is really funny. So very expensive CPU. Consider that this costs more than the GPU. Let's just run a couple tiles of this and see how slow it is. So, you know, the 96 core Threadrippers, they're going to run this test like pretty dang fast, but those are also $10,000, and that's just for the CPU. So that's absolutely wild. But I mean, here you go. This is how fast you can actually produce these tiles with a 24 core Threadripper Pro processor. So it's going to take us probably 2 minutes at least to finish a frame. And so in the 10-minute test, we'd maybe get 4 or 5 frames done. So maybe let's see where the clock ends up here at 1 frame. Yeah, so let's catch the timer when this frame ends, and then we'll compare it to the 4090 GPU. Tummy Tum says 100% agree. Open data benchmark is weird. If it weren't for your spreadsheet, I would have never known that the 7800 XT actually isn't that bad for intensive 3D scenes, since it has more cores basically than the 4070. Yeah, no, and that's what I mean. You can see it produces a frame like this. Here's your example in this amount of time, and so then you would know if you have 6,000 frames like that to make it. It gives you an actual real world amount of time, and that's the goal. All right, yeah. See, so here we are on this wildly expensive processor, and we're not even finished with 1 frame. It's going to be right about 2 minutes. And I don't even know if I have a specific point here. I just find it really interesting how some tasks GPUs can't even do well, like simulations. They take really good software to be able to simulate. So that, yeah, it was right at 2 minutes. So we'll stop that because that's not something we need to worry about. But so 2 minutes for this processor. But GPUs are just so much better at rendering. It's completely mind-blowing. So let's start the GPU test here. So this is a single RTX 4090. And mine is the MSI Liquid X. I don't have any custom overclock on it. But let's just see in 2 minutes how many frames we can create. So keep in mind the only limit here is you have 24 gigs of VRAM instead of 192 gigabytes for the system RAM. But you know, if you work in Blender a lot, you'll know that 24 is a pretty hefty scene. And if you're getting above that, it's probably better to learn to optimize. Exactly my thought. If someone asks me to recommend a GPU for Blender rendering, I recommend NVIDIA. But if that Blender rendering isn't their main goal, all brands are on the table. Exactly. And even at some price levels, I think the A770 is still a really, really good value, except that it's somewhat high power use. But if that doesn't matter to you, then it just really doesn't impact it too much. Let's see. Well, the problem is that people use their PC for a million different things, and you cannot benchmark them all. The chat is not a good place to explain this. Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, everybody's going to probably maybe play a game and they're going to do some 3D stuff. I mean, even really using Excel spreadsheets that get large, that's a whole different type of thing. I mean, a lot of people that do really heavy Blender stuff are probably doing some coding too. So there's a lot of aspects to it, and yeah, so it's hard. It's also hard when people ask for a recommendation because everyone's situation is so different. So I try to get people to give me a pretty exact price limit and then their use case, and you can kind of narrow it down, but there's really no 100% right answer. The A770 is actually pretty usable for resolve editing as well, and not just because of the VRAM. Well, and the A series Intels, I think they were a little ahead of the game, right, with AV1, so they had better encoders from the get-go, which is part of that, I assume. But yeah, when I get my DaVinci Resolve scene figured out, we can go back and test that, and we can see if the B580 does anything. I know that one's a little bit slower, but you know, it's a cheap GPU, so we might as well see what it does too. But all right, yeah, so here we go. How many frames? Oh, this one doesn't tell you how many frames. Oh yeah, it does. So we finished 12 render passes in 2 minutes with this thing. And on the CPU, we barely did one in 2 minutes. So basically, I'll stop this anyway, but basically for all comparison purposes, the 4090 GPU, which is cheaper than this processor at list prices, is 12 times faster at rendering on this exact frame, which is just kind of mind-blowing to me. Let's see. Intel cards have access to QuickSync, otherwise exclusive to Intel CPUs. Oh yeah, I was going to mention that. I don't know as much about that, but that is one of those softwares that really does. It's what is it? It's a memory management, right? Kind of like a direct access memory type thing. It's just a faster access to the cache, basically. So, you know, Intel does have their advantages. I mean, I've definitely recommended the A770 more than once because under $300, it's really a good GPU. Every time I look at Cinebench results, I couldn't care less. I don't work with Cinebench. I don't play with Cinebench. I'll always appreciate more specific tests and specific apps. Well, yeah, I mean, I think Cinebench comes into play if you are trying to run really, really heavy RAM scenes, like Pixar scenes where they talk about needing about 100 gigs of RAM. You know, if you're doing CPU work like rendering, where you have to have that big of a buffer, then that kind of maybe comes into play. And they are good for comparing CPUs on all core workloads, but I know we've kind of been back and forth on that, but it just varies on whether or not an app can even use all of the cores in your processor. I was trying to say, if you can test how well the GPU handles rendering volumes like clouds, that's quite a demanding task for a GPU. It is. And let me think. I know that if I put one of my characters like the one we had on the screen earlier with a lot of body hair on it and fog and the trees in the background, I can start to push 16 to 20 gigs of VRAM pretty easily without trying to optimize anything. So fog and volumes are absolutely massive. You know, slow down. They do look cool though. I think they're worth it, but they're very hard to run. Tummy Tum says, since people were talking RAM earlier, what about those 256 gig configs? I saw some articles back in the day about MSI and ASRock supporting up to 256 gigs on AM5. Yeah, a lot of them claim to, and I think on the X670s they claim that they would eventually, but they just never got them stable. I think you might be limited to 192 on the X870 series. So, and they also, obviously, they have to use the the 3 gigabit chips instead of the 2 gigabit chips or whatever. So you're limited to 192, but I don't know. Does anyone know any different? I don't think you can get more than that on AM5 yet. I would imagine the next generation maybe, but yeah, AMD's memory controllers have been slower than their cores for a couple generations. I'm glad they're kind of figuring out the RAM situation a little. Let's see. Let's go back to our remote desk. I was going to try to keep this stream short, but everybody's still in here. So let's just keep looking at stuff. I think the best time to stream is probably when people are watching, right? So let's go into 4.4. Where did it go? There it is. I like Cinebench for comparing one thread versus all threads, because it shows if the CPU clock's lower over all cores or in games just fine still, so it doesn't even really cause too many problems. But we got a little connection issue here. All right, we lose you guys, or are you still there? Must be fine. All right. YouTube was claiming we lost connection, but I think we're back. That's that Starlink upload speed there. Download speed's good. All right. So let's go back to this scene I use for the viewport test. We can see and hear you. Good. Okay. There are motherboards. Oh, that allow 256 gigs, but not RAM sticks that would fit it. Yeah, exactly. So they said that the motherboards could support higher RAM, but nobody ever came out with a kit that the motherboards would certify. So you just couldn't find a kit that they would guarantee would work at their speeds. I think you could underclock them. Obviously, we've talked about that in the chat. You could underclock the RAM and get them to work, but they're definitely not stable at high speeds. Some AM5 boards unofficially support EEC RAM. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I remember hearing that, but I know the RAM I have is error correcting, but you know, that's another thing that I don't really use. I don't think this kind of workload uses it, but it's all you can run on the Threadrippers anyway. So if you know you need single core performance, you can look at that, or if you use mini cores, you can look. But there's no details like AVX2 versus AVX512. Yeah, true. Yeah, you can't see a whole lot of detail from Cinebench type tests. You know, we should pressure hardware outlets to test physics simulations on CPUs. Or even TechNotice, who claims to be creator-oriented, only runs third-party benchmarks, all score-based. Say goodbye to high speeds after 96 gigs of RAM. Well, yes, I would say on AM5 platforms. On consumer platforms, you're right. On this one, which obviously this is completely obnoxious, but I forgot I was on my remote top. There we go. I was freaking out a little. I thought my RAM went to 3600. That would be pretty concerning. 6400 is what this kit runs at with the Threadripper, and the other ones that they were selling from V-Color went up to like 7200 or 7600 at low latencies, and it was mind-blowing. But the prices were like, I mean, you would pay like $8,000 for 384 gigs at those speeds, which is just wild. So somewhere out there, somebody's got a server that's just running something cool, but definitely not something that I'll be able to do. because I've never got more than about 12 cores to do anything. All right, I'm gonna find a frame here. This one, I don't know if it's turned on in this frame or not. I have a mist pass turned on, so I'll show you guys that too. T-Bones says that bull looks like a badass, reminds me of myself. Well, I don't know. I don't see any proof over there in the chat of that, but oh wow, the Threadripper is a monster. Nice. Yeah, it is crazy. I watched a guy, I can't remember what channel it is. I haven't seen him before, but he overclocked the 7975WX, the 32 core Pro version. He overclocked it to 5.25 gigahertz on all core, and it just, I mean, no matter what, it runs at the same 350 to 400 watts, and it just every thread, it never slows down. It's crazy, just absolutely wild. All right, let's see. So I want to come in here. I haven't actually tested rendering this scene on this GPU, so I'm curious to see how well this will run, because this one takes a couple minutes on the 4090 per frame. So let's just try it. And so this one, it says, oh, where is it on there? They changed how Blender displays its VRAM use. Okay, so yeah, so it's building the shaders. Yeah, so system RAM, it's using almost 30 gigs. Oh yeah, see, it's out of GPU memory. So it says I have 10 gigs of VRAM free, but apparently it did not like that. So let's go change our settings here and try to maybe use tiling and see if we can get this thing to run. So, and then this is kind of one of those things where, oh, you know what? There we go. I was going to say, did they get rid of tiling? Let's do, I don't think it'll matter too much. Let's try 2048. I don't know what these mean as much as I used to. Let's see if that'll work. Tiling should split the frame into pieces so that the VRAM use is less, but we'll see if this will run or not. You know, I'm something of a badass myself, said with a cheeky smile. Lion is a confirmed badass as well. I don't know, it sounds like we're trying to get into a Call of Duty lobby here. Kind of switching directions or something. Manually overclocking Threadripper sounds like fun. I have my old 7820X system like that. 1.2 volts for 4.5 all-core. Yeah, that's pretty good. No tweaking a trillion parameters for PBO or any of that. Unlike the 9700X. Yeah, he has like an hour-long video, that YouTuber, about manually adjusting every single core based on how they perform. I just honestly can't imagine sitting there going through that or manually overclocking RAM. I just can't see myself doing it. Seems like too much work, but that's just a whole hobby basically that some people do. All right, are we going to make it this time? Nope, it won't let us do it. Let's try one more thing. So I can't even get this frame to start with HIIP-RT. Let's see if I can turn off the RT, if that makes a difference. I don't think we're doing anything wrong here, are we? No. Interesting. Denoiser's turned on, that's not a big deal. Try to make a small tile. You know, honestly, maybe we are finding some sort of a 4.4 Blender bug here. Because I don't think this frame uses more than about 10 or 11 gigabytes on my workstation. So maybe we're discovering problems in Blender. Oh, it looks like it's going to run it this time. Maybe, maybe not. Come on. Yep. So it's going to run these little tiny tiles. So when people tell you to save memory by running tiles, this is what it means. But the problem is, this can take so much longer than running the full frame at once that you may as well have just paid up for more VRAM, because it's just not getting the use out of the hardware that you know, you're hoping to get with high VRAM cards. I'd love Wendell from Level 1 Text to finally test his Threadripper 7995WX 96 core for Blender GeoNodes or simulations. Yeah, and what's crazy is these 7000 series Threadrippers, they all can clock to the same speeds, basically. So if you get them cooled well enough, they're all the same power draw, even though they go from 16, I think, 16 to 96 cores. They all use the same size chip, and they all use the same amount of power. I did not know that tiles reduce the memory needed. Yeah. So basically all it's doing is it's splitting this up, and it's only loading the information that it needs for that little piece of the frame. But what you'll notice is every single time it starts a new tile, it has to reload that. And I mean, this is way slower. I mean, it's already been 2 minutes. It's guessing it's another 4.5 minutes, which may be correct, but it's not even up to the trees yet. So if you have to do this, it really slows you down. So VRAM still is probably more important than just speed at some point. So yeah, I mean, this thing is going to take us a bit, and that's the biggest thing. The only way anyone should ever consider buying NVIDIA's Pro GPUs is if you can't function without more VRAM. But they charge so much more for those, and they're not faster than the consumer ones. It's just a terrible deal. But yep. So tiling reduces VRAM use, although I don't know. I haven't tested specifically exactly how much the change is, because I mean, we're running small tiles here, and what are we using? We're using about 11 out of the 16 gigs of VRAM. Many simulations don't scale well with multiple cores. At some point, they're limited by single core speeds, but I'd love to see it. Yeah, I would too. That's why I hope that 96 core server would have been more useful, but the core speed just is so slow that, yeah, you could run a huge simulation, but it would take days and days anyway. So at that point, you're better off just trying to cheat and find other ways to make it look the way you want. Yeah, okay, this is going to take forever. So now I'm curious. Let's try one more thing. Let's turn the tiling back off, but leave HIIP-RT unchecked. I'm wondering if this works the same way optics does. Speaking of simulations, Gaia 2 is my go-to terrain simulation software. Would love to see simulation benchmarks for this too, in case you'd have nothing better to do with your time. I have never used it. I would be interested in trying whatever's out there. Speaking of Pro GPUs, NVIDIA's cooking up a 96 gig variant of the 5090 with the same chip. Wonder how much that thing will cost. I'm guessing it'll be $12,000. I think the last one was $7,000. So it'll be like 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there at least, just because they know they'll sell them. But obviously that is not worth it. It's 4 or 5 times the price for the same chip and just more RAM. I mean, you can't, people working in Blender really probably can't justify getting that. But all right, yeah, here we go. So make a note of that. We'll have to note that in the Discord information pile. If you run AMD GPUs, you have to turn off HIIP-RT if you exceed the VRAM, because it apparently is not efficient on VRAM, I guess. So yeah, here we turned off tiling. It runs fine now. And it looks like it's not spilling into the system RAM. So it doesn't work like CUDA, which will fall back on system memory. But interesting. I don't think we changed anything else, did we? I don't think we changed anything that would have overloaded the VRAM before and not now. So there must be a bug with the RT version then. And I think HIIP-RT is quite a bit faster than just HIP, but you know, if you had something that was this heavy that you had a problem with, it wouldn't really matter. You would just have to do this. But just remember, that is your choice. That's your only option. If you run out of VRAM on your AMD cards, especially new ones, then switch off the RT, I guess, for now. I'm glad we discovered that. That could have been like a whole post about that. That's interesting. Yeah, so I mean, this scene is obnoxious. This is 1080p, but every single one of these hairs is actually present in the scene. You know, they're not efficient at all to render, but they look cool. You know, same thing with the trees. These are all just completely obnoxious calculations for every single leaf. So this is the complete opposite of optimizing your scenes. But with the render farm, I don't have to think about that at all. I'm lucky enough to have all that hardware, so a couple minutes per frame really doesn't slow it down too much. Let's see. A gaming graphic card for sure. Yes. Yes, just wait. Just wait. When it comes out, I think it's going to be the RTX Pro 6000B or something like that. When that comes out, the first video you'll see will be what FPS can we run on this $12,000 GPU. It'll be a Linus Tech Tips like first thing that morning. I'm calling it now. They're gonna game on it and go, this isn't worth it for gaming. Gaia 2 is free for demo purposes. There are no time or core usage restrictions except build resolution. You can create and view terrains up to 4K square and export up to 1K square. Cool. And are they textures or are they like images of terrains, like backgrounds? What are they? I'm gonna have to look into that, because one of the things I need to figure out is how to build worlds. Very interesting. I want to use Unreal Engine more to build actual scenery, but again, I've got to get into that. All right. Yeah, so see, we're not even halfway done here. I bet you if HIIP-RT would work for this frame, we'd get a lot better speed. But this thing's starting to think it's going to take another 7 or 8 minutes to render this, which is pretty ridiculous. So obviously, I think there's still some bugs with HIIP-RT. Honestly, that's got to be the only answer here. But I'll go ahead and close out of that. And we'll close out of our remote desktop. Yeah, no, I think for this video, we've done about all we can do. We need to come up with some more of these fluid simulation tests. I think you guys are right. The CPU testing is definitely lacking out there on the internet for this kind of work. And somebody needs to be able to figure out if 3D cache matters or not. I think that'll be a good question to finally answer. I googled that a lot when those processors started to come out, and nobody even brings it up. Marvelous Designer uses GPU compute to simulate cloth in real time. That would make for an interesting test. Yep. You know what? I'm gonna run out of storage in my brain. Let me write down a few of these things. I watch for a post like right after this or in the morning, but I'll probably just send a post with the link to the Discord page. There's nothing in there yet. But I think we need to start getting these things on paper because people comment constantly and there's no way I'm going to be able to keep all these things straight anymore. So I'm going to make some notes for myself. But yeah, I think that's a good stream for tonight. Let's kind of just get in the Discord in the next few days and start to build out what that looks like. I know some people I've talked to on YouTube before. They kind of know how to set the servers up a little better. No paper Discord server. Okay, all right. We'll leave the paper out. You sound like all the interns at work. We used to use only papers, and none of the stuff was electronic only a few years ago, and they're just completely mind blown by that. Marvelous Designer. So Marvelous Designer for cloth. Gaia 2 is for environments. What was Gaia 2 again? They generate splat maps, but they also offer mesh to export to. To optimize exported mesh, basically decimated where it matters nicely. Oh, okay. So they're kind of a large-scale texturing tool for environments. Gaia 2, awesome, awesome. How do you join the Discord? I'd like to contribute 9700X and 7820X results for fun. So the post, it'll probably be on the community page. It'll just be a link. So if you have, I think you have to probably have a Discord user. So you'd want to set that up first. And then when you click on the link, it'll take you right into my server that I set up. And it'll automatically put like a permission set on your username so that you have access to whatever you're allowed to do in there and whatever you're allowed to see. I haven't used it a lot on, as the one owning the server yet, but it is pretty cool. I think you can make invites that have like dates on them. And so if you joined from this link, it could put a badge on your name that says you joined on this date or you've been there for this long. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. And you could send a link with a specific badge to see like if people went to that post or something. So you can kind of track things by how they joined. But yeah, I think you click on a link and it'll just basically say, yeah, here's the server. Do you want to join it? It's kind of an invite, but yeah, watch for that. It's going to be public. We'll see if people behave in there or not. If they don't, I guess I'll have to start picking mods or something for it. I can't imagine the bots do all of the moderation properly on their own. But yeah, no, awesome. Well, thanks to everyone for being here. I'll get that sent out, and I guess I got to learn about 12 new softwares. So thanks for that. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Oh, the only thing I'd recommend before setting up Discord, Oh, okay. Make it so they can't interact or see with other members until passing verification. Okay. This will prevent a lot of spam. I do have the, I can't remember what it's called. I do have a bot set up for see you, Sebastian. Thanks for coming. I have a bot set up that's supposed to prevent a lot of the spam and you know, offensive language and harassment stuff. I don't remember what it's called, so we'll see if that works. But maybe I'll send out a couple invites to people that are normally commenting on here, and I'll try to, if you guys are willing, I'll try to pick some brains and see what I should be doing, because I know there's a right way to start it so that it's not a mess. But I'll look into that and we'll get this thing going. So yep, no, thanks for that. That's a good thought. I'd hate for it to just be a big useless mess instantly. So all right, well, yeah, watch for that, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you. You can always change things later. It's just much easier to do it from the start instead of changing things midway. No, that makes sense. I will do what I can to make it a good place. Yep, see ya. Lion, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Oh.